Story 1. Abrego Garcia's guilt or innocence is really beside the point. In the United States, you cannot disappear a person to a foreign gulag without due process of law. And you certainly cannot dismiss a Supreme Court decision to report on the person's situation and, as directed, work for his return. I do not know if he is part of MS-13 or any other group, but that fact must be adjudicated in front of the proper authority, and the accused should have legal representation. No one knows what the facts are because they have not been examined in the proper forum. Story 2. I fully applaud and support him in this endeavor, but I must be honest. My first thought when it was announced was of Congressman Leo Ryan and his fate in Guyana in 1978. There are similarities. Story 3. Chris Van Hollen's support for Kilmar Abrego Garcia demonstrates true leadership. When a United States resident is wrongfully deported despite court protection, it is appropriate for our representatives to intervene. Due process matters. No one should be left behind due to government errors. Story 4. He should make a stop in Panama so people could say, I watched Van Hollen's Panama video today. Story 5. I swear every day is another one of these. Americans, your country is swiftly turning into the worst fascist hellscape in history, as your rights are eroded, and you live with the constant specter of being disappeared to a death camp simply for existing. How does that make you feel? How do you think that? It reminds me of Leo Ryan, the congressman killed after flying out to check on Jonestown. Except instead of a crazy death cult, it's a crazy death America where half the country is cheering for innocent people to die, too naive to realize that if this man has no due process, none of us do. It just takes one unfounded accusation to whisk anyone away to their deaths with no way to prove your innocence. Not that they seem to care if you are anyway. Story 6. It's about time someone did something instead of just speaking empty words about Trump. I don't care if half or all the people detained are actually murderers or gang members. We literally don't know if they are because they never received any kind of trial. Story 7. In our current time, it seems brave that almost all politicians lack the courage to act. Story 8. I support Senator Van Hollen. He is standing up for America and its citizens against tyranny. It seems Van Hollen was denied access to the prison, while others were allowed to enter and take pictures. I believe this indicates that Mr. Garcia has passed away and that it is being covered up. Story 9. I think we got our answer since they wouldn't even let him confirm he is alive. I am wondering if the people being transported are immediately disposed of to ensure no one advocates for them. Story 10. As a Maryland resident, I support it wholeheartedly. Someone needs to combat the illegal actions that Trump is taking. Story 11. He's trying to do the right thing, but he has been denied visitation, and I fear Abrego Garcia is already dead. Story 12. I'm very nervous for him because this administrator is showing that they are capable of getting away with almost anything, and they might be emboldened to take action against him. However, I am somewhat relieved that someone is willing to take a stand and hope that more Democrats make the effort in the near future. Something needs to be done. Story 13. Honestly, I doubt he will succeed. The leader of El Salvador has no obligation to listen to a foreign leader and received payment from Donald Trump to take these individuals. Story 14. Unless everyone is guaranteed due process, then no one is guaranteed due process. If the government can categorically exclude people from due process, then all the government has to do is state that someone is a member of one of those groups, at which point they no longer have the right to due process. The Republican Party is detrimental. Story 15. It speaks to his good character that he makes the effort. He shouldn't have to because our laws forbid this behavior. However, our leader in the White House seems unconcerned with the law. Story 16. Appropriate. Garcia was his constituent. Senators are supposed to advocate for all residents of their state, not just those who can vote. After all, children cannot vote but are still constituents. Story 17. Admire him for doing what many others won't. Ashamed that he is the only one. Angry that we're here. Eager for meaningful change. Terrified of what comes next. This year, April 20th will be different when the Insurrection Act is enacted, the Posse Comitatus Act is undone, and the detention centers are opened. Story 18. I believe he has the right idea and is brave to make the request. When he returns, watch the Department of Justice charge him with violating the Hatch Act. Never abandon citizens or legal residents. What good are you as a country if you do not respect the rights of the people? Story 19, more should join him. There are concerns about leadership. Hey Schumer, what's on your schedule? How about taking the lead for a change? Senator Van Hollen better come back safe without a scratch. Story 20, absent proof and due process. The deportation of K.A. Garcia by Immigration and Customs Enforcement and the Trump administration sounds more like human trafficking. Story 21, why do conservatives keep saying he is a criminal? I can't find anything online that states that. Only that he came illegally, but my understanding is that he was a refugee. Can you provide more information? Story 22. Everybody should be taking to the streets on April 19, 2025, to protest this tyranny. Story 23. Good move. More senators from both parties need to show more courage and start taking similar actions. Story 24. He will be turned away at the prison gates, if not right at the airport. But I applaud him for trying and for bringing attention to the matter. Story 25. Regardless of whether the man is guilty of any charges against him, he deserves due process. If the administration is not going to do anything to bring him back, someone else needs to act. Story 26. I believe the individuals responsible for placing him in custody, putting him on that plane, and disregarding both court orders to return him to the United States should face imprisonment. I think Congress has been far too complicit in this situation. I am grateful for Chris Van Hollen taking meaningful action and wish more members of our federal government were upholding their oath to protect the Constitution, rather than assisting a rogue executive in undermining it. Story 27. I keep thinking about California State Congressman Leo Ryan going down to check on his constituents in Guyana in the Jonestown cult and being shot on the airport tarmac. Story 28. Just a reminder, deportation is a process that goes through the courts. He was kidnapped and trafficked. Please stop saying Kilmar was deported. Story 29. They want us to riot, but there aren't enough people of color in the crowd yet to enact martial law. El Salvador is being paid millions to keep him there, according to the senator. Instead of rioting, we should protest and focus on impacting their finances. Note, people of color, please stay home. This isn't your fight. Your ancestors did enough, and it's our turn to fix this racist, broken system. Story 30. Unless he has a black operations team to free Garcia while El Salvador denies his entry, it seems pointless. It would be better to draft articles of impeachment for the person who sent an innocent man to a concentration camp. Story 31. It is a self-serving political stunt, the political version of a TikTok video. I had hoped such nonsense had been confined to the House, where the most well-known members have risen in prominence through their social media fame instead of actually passing impactful and intelligent legislation. However, it seems the foolishness has spread to the upper chamber of Congress. Democrats have struggled since November, so I suppose one decided to pursue this approach. Story 32. The answers on Reddit are mostly in favor of what Van Hollen did, as the majority of users tend to lean left. I believe it is a publicity stunt to gain support from progressive voters. Story 33. Someone should take action. It is absurd that Immigration and Customs Enforcement can wrongly deport an individual, admit in court that they made an error, and then refuse to return him despite a judge's orders. This situation has become intolerable. Someone should organize a team to address this issue. Story 34. I believe more people should take action, and it seems likely that there will be an increase in participation. Kilmar is not the only individual mistakenly sent to El Salvador, but he has become a symbol for change, and hopefully this will initiate a movement. Story 35. I feel like, why is he the only one? This is an outrage, and Trump should be in prison, not the White House. Story 36. A waste of time and money. Shameless pandering. Release him to where? He is an illegal immigrant in his home country. Trump could and will arrest him if he returns and deport him to El Salvador, making this entire virtue signaling charade pointless. Story 37. I support it. Garcia doesn't deserve to be there. This situation is a ridiculous miscarriage of justice. The reason for this may be that the individuals behind it are so egotistical they would rather a man rot in prison than admit to a mistake, or they may be motivated by racism, trying to expel Hispanic people from the country by any means necessary. Perhaps it is both. The fact is, the man was not charged with a crime, was not given a fair trial, and is being imprisoned in a manner that is unconstitutional by any measure. No one who claims to uphold American values can also claim that this is justice. If you think this can't happen to you, remember that those in 1930s Germany thought the same before they faced dire consequences. The persecution of Jews and other non-Aryan groups began with claims of expulsion due to being perceived as detrimental to the country. It escalated to mass murder as a means that was deemed easier than mass deportation. Story 38. It is nice to see Senator Van Hollen advocating for the rights of criminals while completely ignoring the victims. Additionally, Garcia is a citizen of El Salvador and remains in El Salvador. The president of El Salvador stated he would not send him back to the United States because Garcia is a member of MS-13. This is an example of grandstanding. I wonder how much this costs the taxpayers. Story 39. I believe he is misguided. He hardly acknowledged the death of the young woman from Maryland who was killed by an illegal immigrant, yet he is extremely concerned about an illegal immigrant from El Salvador being sent back to his home country. Story 40. My first thought is that I hope the senator comes back. It reminds me of what happened during another infamous visit to Jim Jones' compound. I hope history doesn't repeat itself. Story 41. I believe it is a publicity stunt that will change absolutely nothing. That is one of the few areas where the Democratic Party excels. Story 42. This forum should be renamed Ask the Left, because that is the only opinion you will find here. Anyone outside of that perspective receives a permanent ban. If this forum truly represented a mix of the population, you would find more opinions than just one side. Not everyone supports the senator going to another country to attempt to bring back a criminal. People forget that American citizens have rights, while undocumented individuals do not. He is back in his home country where he belongs. Story 43. This is what real patriotism looks like. An attempt, however risky, to correct an obvious injustice. Every single Republican is a disgrace to the American flag, the American people, and the forefathers of this country, as evidenced by their complacency while Trump shreds the Constitution day after day. I would rather they wear their Trump flags and North Korea-style Trump pins than further defile the American flag with their actions. Story 44. He didn't travel once to Gaza, where dozens of innocent Americans were held against their will, but he goes to El Salvador on behalf of a citizen of El Salvador. Let me ask you, what do you call that? Story 45. Arrested multiple times on gang-related offenses with other members, but not in jail. Informant. His wife filed a protective order against him after he assaulted her. He is a gang member. His wife and children now live off the backs of teenage girls forced into being sex slaves and engaging in prostitution by this gang. He is despicable. No matter how the media portrays it, this individual is not just an ordinary dad from Maryland. The president of El Salvador stated that he will not be released into either El Salvador or the United States. He is finished. I reached my limit when I read about him assaulting his wife. No matter how misguided she may be for defending him, she still does not deserve that. Story 46. If due process doesn't apply to Mr. Garcia, it doesn't apply to anyone. No president, no senator, no citizen. Effectively, we are not under martial law. It is claimed that it will only apply to this person or that, but that is never true. Martial law applies to all. Combining this with the fact that the former president does not see himself as sharing power with Congress or the judiciary means that America is now a dictatorship. Story 47. My thoughts are that they need to get that man home to the United States, where he lives with his family legally. A convicted felon sits in the Oval Office while a man without charges is sitting in jail. This is not acceptable. We are better than this. Story 48. I believe it is a complete waste of time and entirely foolish. Everyone saying Trump cannot do this or that requires lawyers and judges to intervene. But this individual, He knew going to El Salvador would not bring him back. He understands that his position does not allow him to stop Trump from doing this to others. He is solely focused on getting reelected. I am exhausted from pretending it is anything other than that. No real effort on his part is being made to stop Trump or prevent others from being sent to El Salvador. Story 49. He is an incompetent politician for physically attending events and apparently has the mental capacity of an egg salad sandwich if he thinks this will do anything positive for him. He is traveling to a different country to show American support for El Salvadoran gang members. Good luck with that. Story 50. The person with a restraining order on bond for domestic violence? Some individuals always choose the most unusual issues to stand for. Story 51. It is a time-honored tradition that goes back to our founding fathers. If he is good enough for the position, I would support him for Secretary of State in the next election. Story 52. I think he is going to be killed. El Salvador will tell us that the MS-13 gang did it. Maybe the gang will carry it out, but they will do it at the behest of their government. It is all a troubling game played by an established dictator and an emerging dictator, and it is costing lives. Story 53. I support the gesture, but I am not too hopeful. Dementia has been denied, and those involved in the group thrive on cruelty, so they are indifferent. Story 54. It is a shame that it takes all of this to get one of our own back. Abandoned by the upper echelons of our government and failed miserably at that. Story 55. Why not pay attention to your own constituents instead of grandstanding on a liberal Don Quixote-like mission? Story 56. He is a hero standing up for what is right. He is taking an enormous risk and should be supported and applauded. Story 57. It is an absurdity caused by the Supreme Court. The Trump administration's contract with El Salvador states that they will hold the prisoners until the United States makes a determination. No diplomacy is needed. It is not a foreign affairs issue. Story 58. Performative virtue signaling is nonsensical. What does he expect to happen? Will they suddenly decide to release him back to the US only for him to be deported again? That's foolish. Story 59. Republicans need to understand that this isn't about saving a terrorist. It's about due process of law and the lack of it during this situation. If Biden sent the January 6th protesters to El Salvador without due process, you would be outraged. Story 60. 100% publicity. What is a senator going to do? On his own, the man barely has any power in his own government, much less a foreign one. And it's not like he is doing this to bring attention to the case. The news media is already giving the situation significant coverage. His addition is nothing more than waste. Maryland tax dollars are essentially going towards giving him a paid vacation to El Salvador. That's all this amounts to. If he truly wanted to fight the good fight, he would be leading it here where the heart of the problem is. Just look at Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. They got approximately 36,000 people to come out and support their call for more government assistance in the middle of the day. The numbers are clearly available if Hollen was motivated enough to draw them in. Story 61. I hope he is allowed to come back to the United States after that. I see that some individuals have found this post. To explain my reasoning, the United States Supreme Court has ruled that the most the government has to do in the situation where a person is wrongfully detained in El Salvador is to attempt to secure that person's release, with no guidance on what constitutes such an attempt. Under that rule, there is nothing stopping El Salvador from detaining Senator Van Hollen on frivolous criminal charges when he visits the country for this purpose. And there is nothing preventing the Trump administration from making only superficial and insincere attempts to secure Senator Van Hollen's release should this occur. Story 62. I fully support and applaud it. I am aware there is a slim chance he actually brings him back. However, I hope he is at least able to see him and return to report on his condition, if he is still alive, and the conditions of the prison referred to as a death camp. Story 63. I honestly hope he is successful. Watching him bring Garcia back only to be immediately deported and then arrested for smuggling an illegal immigrant would be quite amusing. Story 64. I applaud this. I hope it will lead to a better understanding of what is really happening there regarding the agreement between the United States and them. Story 65. a legal U.S. resident, who is a husband and father to U.S. citizens, with no evidence of gang participation. We are much more concerned about the lack of due process than anything else. If Kilmar had been a gang member and that was proven in court, and he was deported to his home country, great. No problems with that. But if hundreds of people can be sent to a detention center with no due process, everyone should be concerned. Because then it can happen to anyone. You are a citizen, you are innocent. It doesn't matter if you never have the chance to prove it. Story 66. I'm wondering if the government of El Salvador will let him leave. Trump won't care if they arrest him on a false charge and throw him in jail. Nobody in the MAGA movement will care either. Story 67. He is a patriot, and I applaud his effort. I will be surprised if the government of El Salvador allows him to get anywhere near that prison camp. But his trip there is bringing significant attention to Garcia's situation. That will help to maintain pressure on Trump regarding this matter. I wish more individuals in the House of Representatives and the Senate would take action. Story 68. I wish some Democratic lawmakers would travel to our southern border and show people how peaceful and pleasant it is now. So much good karma. How is your day going? Story 69. Since the Trump administration has loosely defined foreign policy, I expect Bondi to move to arrest him upon his return for treading into an area they have stated is solely the president's responsibility. Story 70. He is brave and a hero, 10 times the leader of anyone in the Making America Great Again movement. He is putting himself in harm's way, while other representatives won't even hold a town hall for fear of their feelings getting hurt. Story 71. I don't know, but if Kilmar was here illegally, he should have waited in line like everyone else who is supposed to be here. I just don't think advocating for someone who is illegal is good politics. Story 72. I am American but have lived overseas for the last 20 years. If he comes home, he will come home alone. I emphasize if, because I doubt Trump will allow him to leave the prison once he goes in for an inspection. Either way, I have very little hope this will end well for anyone. Story 73. He is not making sense. It's all a performance for someone who is unlawfully in our country, and contrary to popular belief, it will cost the Democratic Party more support among mainstream voters. Story 74. Honestly, I respect that he is actually showing up and putting pressure where it matters. Most senators won't even read a brief, let alone travel across borders. Even if it is symbolic, symbols matter sometimes. Story 75. I wish they cared more about the people suffering from the effects of natural disasters in this country and the homeless. I cannot believe this is a priority for Democrats, focusing intensely on an illegal immigrant. Story 76. Yes, these comments went exactly as expected. Many of my fellow citizens have lost the plot for the sake of partisan politics. Story 77. I think it shows real leadership, but wasn't the leader of El Salvador just in the United States? Wouldn't it have been safer to meet with him here first? They are never letting any of them go alive. The main reason is that these individuals will talk about what they experienced there, and they cannot have that happening. Story 78. Performative. He knew it wasn't going to do anything, but now he is the hero. Honestly, I don't know what he could actually do that is legal. Story 79. At least he is standing up and trying to do the right thing. We need more of these kinds of actions. Story 80. He should remind the leader that Trump will not be president forever and America has a long history of overthrowing Latin American dictators who angered us. Story 81. For once, a senator is actually earning that paycheck. It's surprising that Republicans are okay with one of their own being locked up abroad without due process. Story 82. As a North Carolina resident who has no intention of ever living in Maryland, I donated $50 to his campaign this morning. Story 83. I am proud to have grown up in Maryland. It is diverse, and people are community-oriented and take care of one another. It is a place where everyone bonds over the state flag and Old Bay seasoning. Growing up near Washington, D.C., fosters a deep respect for the foundations of government, despite its flaws. I am not surprised that Chris Van Hollen is showing the rest of the country what true patriotism is. Story 84. He can go and try. But the reality is that the El Salvador government is not going to release this criminal into the hands of a senator. Story 85. I heard that Garcia is part of a gang and has a restraining order from his wife due to physical violence made a few years ago. If this is true, I do not support the senator bringing him back. We do not need more violence in the United States. Story 86. It would be nice if he were at home caring for his constituents who are victims of illegal immigration. Story 87. I believe it is a positive development. The executive branch is demonstrating criminal negligence. So we need the other branches to step up and fulfill the government's responsibilities. Story 88. Has anyone heard from Garcia in the last couple of days? The supporters of Trump are not going to let him back into the United States. I don't mean to sound negative, but he is either in a dark place, never to be heard from again, or has encountered an administrative error that led to his demise. Story 89. Everybody is calling for Democrats to take action, but I am sure they will also overlook this trip. Story 90. Now here is a suggestion for implementation. They release all the prisoners, but it is a swap. We send them one member of the current administration, starting from the top and working our way down until we have them all back. Story 91. I find it unusual for a senator to request a president of a foreign country to deport one of their own citizens. Story 92. El Salvador is holding him because he is a citizen of El Salvador. Kilmar Abrego Garcia has ties to the gang MS-13. The United States government did nothing wrong or illegal in his deportation back to El Salvador. Since Kilmar Abrego Garcia is a citizen of El Salvador, he is home. The action of the United States government demanding that he be removed from El Salvador and brought back to the U.S. is close to the definition of kidnapping a foreign citizen. This occurs after the U.S. government has barred him from re-entering the country. If lawmakers do not respect the laws when they are not in power, then why should we respect the laws when they are in power? Story 93. Why is he trying to bring a deported illegal immigrant back into the country? What is his legal basis for doing this? Could he be charged with aiding and abetting if he proceeds? Story 94. Democrats will continue to lose if they prioritize illegal immigration over American citizens. Story 95. I don't know how to respond to this. Honestly, I hope he has some courage and at least has protective gear. He has the courage to go, but will he have it when it comes to talking? Story 96. I support his efforts but do not believe the chances of his death are higher than his chances of success. Story 97. He is doing the right thing. Garcia is already dead, and they won't admit it. They are going to kill Hollen to try and cover up that it is truly a Holocaust-style extermination camp. But I hope and pray that the El Salvadoran government executing a United States senator, even with Trump's blessing, will be enough to turn the country against Trump and his exporting of innocents to extermination camps. Story 98. He was denied access, and that is no surprise. It was a pointless effort regardless of the good intentions. Story 99. He is brave. I hope he makes it home unharmed, but I am pretty sure he will not. I am having the same memories as others my age and waiting for the awful news to come. Story 100. Contrary opinion and feel free to downvote. Kilmar Abrego Garcia was given his due process, denied asylum in the United States, and was subject to deportation. The administrative error was sending him to El Salvador, as the protective order prohibited this instead of Guatemala or another country. He is a citizen of El Salvador, and we cannot do more than suggest he be returned to the United States. If he were, he would be legitimately sent right back out to somewhere not in the United States. Van Hollen is a grandstanding individual who cares more about a gang member than his constituents. Story 101. Advocating for political prisoners is noble, but it is like walking into a lion's den. It is hopeful but risky. I have respect for Senator Van Hollen, but history shows these missions can go wrong quickly. What do you think? Is it worth it? Story 102. It is refreshing to see some elected officials standing up. I can no longer remain polite about this situation. This administration is infringing on fundamental civil liberties and undermining our judicial processes. It is encouraging to have at least one senator making an effort. Is the likelihood of success high? Now, am I concerned that this individual may have inadvertently put himself in danger of arrest and detention? Absolutely. However, he is making a bold and public effort to keep this man's detention in the public eye, ensuring he is not forgotten, which is commendable. Story 103. I pray he comes back alive. If Abrego Garcia is alive, there is no reason his senator should not be able to see him. If they will not allow that, there is a very simple and terrifying reason. Story 104. Garcia is a citizen of El Salvador. The president of El Salvador stated that it will not happen. Garcia is outside of America's sphere of influence. He is back in his homeland. Van Hollen is engaging in a public relations stunt, and he is aware of it. He will come home empty-handed. As an American, the senator should be concerned about all of his constituents rather than an El Salvadoran who came here illegally. However, as a Democrat, the senator will do anything to interfere with Trump's plans. Story 105. I doubt he will be successful, but I applaud the effort. Where is the rest of the Democratic Congress? We, the people, need to continue speaking up, demonstrating peacefully, and resisting. It will be a long fight back to democracy, but we have no other choice if we value freedom. Story 106. Not American, but I hope it is more than a photo opportunity. If he actually comes up with some useful information, he is doing a good job. If he just comes back with a shrug and says, I tried, it will not be well received. Story 107. I applaud him and wish he had traveled with an elite group of individuals with specialized skills to extract Abrego Garcia from the death camp. Story 108. On one hand, it's impressive to see a United States senator stepping up like that. It's not every day you see someone in Congress personally flying out to handle something like this. It makes you wonder what exactly is going on with the case. But is this normal? Do senators usually get involved in situations like this? Feels a little unusual. I mean, don't get me wrong, if Kilmar is stuck in a bad situation and didn't do anything wrong, then yes, fight for him. Totally. But it's got people divided. Story 109. Absolute publicity stunt. Does the congressman fight as hard for the estimated 36 Americans currently being held as political prisoners around the world? I do not recall ever hearing the congressmen plead their cases or travel to the countries where they are being imprisoned on their behalf. The congressman's focus is on the wrong individuals. He has been told by everyone except God that the individual is not coming back. Story 110. As a Maryland resident, I am proud of what he is doing. This is exactly what our elected representatives should do for the residents of their state, regardless of immigration or citizenship status. Story 111. Futile effort. Personally, I am convinced he is already dead, and that is why they are trying so hard to keep him hidden. At least someone is doing something. I hope he has brought plenty of private security with him. Otherwise, I have no doubt he will be detained and imprisoned to prevent him from telling the world what is happening there. Story 112. At least someone is doing something. The Trump administration's actions regarding deportations of people without due process, the dishonesty, the corruption, and the bribery should be considered as scandalous as Watergate. Story 113. All he is doing is what the Supreme Court has already ordered the Trump administration to do, so I do not understand why anyone would find this controversial. The fact that Republicans are upset someone is trying to return a wrongly deported man from a foreign prison shows how far the party has fallen. It is disappointing to see people voting for unethical politicians. Story 114. He should advocate for the release of all those detained there. It is a torture chamber that is inhumane, disgusting, and immoral. I admire that he went there. Story 115. He is not going to be able to get him back to the United States. He might be able to get him out of prison and send him somewhere else where he has a chance of reuniting with his family if the person is still alive. Story 116. He is either dead or never getting out because they cannot have him going around doing multiple interviews speaking about his experience. Things are bad and only going to get worse. The checks and balances seem to have no spine. The significant issue in the next few weeks will be how the Supreme Court handles Trump's team ignoring them. Story 117. I think he needs to be careful because it is an opportunity for him to go missing, and no one will look for him. I strongly believe Kilmar is already dead. Story 118. His actual constituents are being harmed and killed by undocumented immigrants, and he issues a statement only once. He travels to another country for an undocumented immigrant who should have been deported in 2019. Our priorities differ. Story 119. I applaud him for stepping up. However, I seriously doubt the officials there will receive him, and I am absolutely certain they will not allow him to see Abrego Garcia. Story 120. Someone is actually addressing a terrifying problem. Finally, allowing our government to abduct anyone it labels as a criminal and make them disappear is a level of dictatorship reminiscent of Vladimir Putin. Donald Trump plays fast and loose with who is and isn't a criminal. He is a criminal by legal definition. He is also a homegrown one. He has stated that journalists who criticize him are criminals. We are not far from witnessing another journalist being abducted and harmed. Story 121. It's unfortunate that we are in this situation as a country, but it's encouraging to see politicians taking action and engaging in meaningful efforts. Story 122. I am thankful and proud. We cannot give up. Leadership involves caring for those who society can easily overlook and harm. Story 123. I expect no less from my elected representatives. Anyone making excuses for this is unpatriotic. Story 124. It's about time that our elected leaders stand up for what is right. They are supposed to be the voice of the people, have ethics, courage, and do what is right. Now, let's get this guy home to his family. Story 125. He is a person misusing taxpayer money for illegal purposes. He displays abusive behavior and relies on others to feel strong. Story 126. About time it happened, but I'm nervous. I'm old enough to remember what happened at Jonestown, and Trump and Bikel reek of the same zealotry and corruption that can go off the rails unexpectedly. Story 127. The situation might benefit from a publicity attempt like this. The ultimate problem is finding a consequence for those who have instigated these tests of our democracy and resolve. I can think of consequences that would work on the typical politician. I can think of consequences that would work on normal people in general. This is kind of unprecedented because the last time something like this happened in developed countries was about 100 years ago, and it took 3/4 of the major military forces in the world getting involved to resolve it, which ultimately only dispersed the suffering for decades further. I'm not sure how to make it clear to someone who is clearly suffering from dementia and being manipulated for profit that they have messed with the wrong people in the wrong place at the wrong time. Story 128. I thought I grew up in a country that would tear your country apart to save one American. At least that's what we were told. Now we're wondering if any of us are safe. I'm a straight white American man who works on a farm. Once they're done with everyone else, please don't tell them I'm an atheist. Story 129. Great, especially since we found out that he has no record and he is only being held there because Trump paid El Salvador to keep him. Story 130. Good for him for listening to all the Democrats calling his office. He will gain public relations points. However, the MS-13 gang member will probably not be returning to the United States. Story 131. Performance theater. Give it a moment, and there will be another politician crying in front of a fence that ends up being a photo opportunity in front of an empty parking lot with nothing behind it. Story 132. It is good to see a politician advocating for their constituents. Increasingly, it seems they have forgotten that this is the job they are being paid to do. Story 133. Like everything Van Hollen does, it is performative and essentially a means to grab media attention. If he wants to go ahead, that's good for him. Story 134. I am very proud to be a resident of Maryland, even if he was not successful. I appreciate the attempt and believe it was genuine. Story 135. I am proud to have voted for this man in the past couple of elections. I was a Republican my entire life until Trump came into power, though I was on my way out after McCain didn't win. I greatly disliked the Tea Party and how it was morphing into fascism. I always considered myself an Eisenhower Republican and deeply disliked the resurgence of McKinleyism. Story 136. It's about time someone in government took decisive action. Apparently, There is at least one congressman who still has integrity, and I applaud him. Anyone who allows this level of trampling on the Constitution is unpatriotic. Story 137. At least someone has the courage to try to do something. I don't care if he did something he shouldn't. This is a disgusting affront to the Constitution we are supposed to abide by. Every single American should be outraged about this. Story 138. I believe that Trump was just plain foolish, but now I see he is harmful. Senator Chris Van Hollen did the right thing. Now it's up to America to speak. Story 139. I would love to put Trump, Bondi, and others in Garcia's shoes for 48 hours. This is the hate administration. Story 140. I don't understand why 20 more senators didn't accompany him. Why didn't he gather more congressional colleagues to support him? I'm sure he would have appreciated additional backing. Story 141. The man has my support. That is what real men and leaders do, lead by example. This is something that Trump has never done and likely never will. Story 142. I'm not expecting either of them to come home. Assuming the plane can even get off the ground with those massive loads he is carrying, we need more people like him in leadership. Story 143. As an American, he is fulfilling his responsibilities and working to protect the citizens of the United States and their rights as outlined in the Constitution. Story 144. He should be rewarded for his actions. At this point, we know nothing of Garcia's health, well-being, or the evidence against him. They declared that he was taken wrongly, yet they will do nothing to bring him back. Within a few days, they have created the narrative that he is here illegally and is a member of the MS-13 gang. Story 145. These are a series of questions that lack intelligence. It is concerning what is happening, but what value could come from reading the opinions of people online? Story 146. His attempt should have received widespread support from the Democratic National Committee. It should have involved senators and state representatives, and it should have been broadcast on C-SPAN. Story 147. The Vice President of El Salvador admitted to Senator Van Hollen that the Trump administration is paying them to keep Kilmar Garcia in El Salvador. Story 148. He is a citizen of El Salvador who is currently in El Salvador. This is not our concern. In fact, at this point, we have no jurisdiction. They can release him if they choose to. Story 149. I think it is unfortunate that he has to go through this. First, no one should be sent to a prison in El Salvador without going through the proper legal channels here. If individuals are found guilty of crimes and are Salvadoran, then they can be deported there. Secondly, as soon as the administration realized they had made a mistake, they should have brought him back. Third, rather than acknowledge their mistake, they continue to insist on their position, which reveals their true nature. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.